And on the existing courtesies, I know in Nigeria we are accustomed to existing protocols. The Englishman said that word is not there. Thank you very much. And for the next 1.5 hours, first 1 hour for the discussion, 30 minutes for question and answers. We will be x-raying in greater details what we heard in the keynote address. When I was being taught tax law, the impression was given that taxation was not a viable profession for lawyers. And in any event, the question was whether, as a lawyer, you do with calculations. Incidentally, for the 1 year we read tax law as an optional course, we didn't see calculation. We only talked law. Much later, it dawned on me, and I think aspects of that were actually said in the keynote address, that you could look at tax from a policy angle, you could look at tax from a angle, you could look at tax from a law perspective. But in the keynote address, there's something that caught me real quick, and that's the nature of our educational system. And I remembered listening to a Zambian complain about the educational system in Africa, and he said, the kind of education we have is one where we are taught to remember. Our students are not taught to question the question. Our students are taught how to label the parts of a tree, but not the value of a tree. So it dawns on me that within the structure of our theme for today, we've been told the shocks are there. There's nothing we can do about it. Our discussion really must be on how we approach these shocks. And we've been advised in devising means to come out of these shocks, it has to be in a better, bolder, and stronger basis. But sometimes I ask the question, are we really not putting the cart before the horse? If we don't have an economic development process that makes meaning, and I'm sure in the discussion, clarity on this will be made. The model we have today, is it one that can take us to the El Dorado we want? And I'm particularly worried because if we look at our respective institutions, in sector, where the emphasis is on quick profit, not real growth, is it our corporate structure, where the emphasis is on shareholder value and not stakeholder value? Or you just name it. In fact, I read a book. The title is 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism. And if I have my way, nobody will assume office in the Federal Executive Council without reading that book. The author of that book had an earlier book called The Bad Samaritan. And what was his thesis? There is no nation that develops that wants you to meet them there. They climb up and throw away the ladder. You have to find a way of making your own ladder and climbing up. So each time we sit down and we discuss policy imperatives in Nigeria, as the keynote address said, are we doing it holistically or do we do them piecemeal? short-term benefits, for short-term goals, we will get there. These are some of the things that within this context we're going to be discussing today. I know each of the panelists came here with an of what to present to us. So I would want to give five minutes to each of them to give us something like an opening brief. There we can pick up in terms of questions and answers. So permit me the privilege to call on Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. By the way, all the discussants, their profile, their resume, is in the program of events, so there's no point reciting who they are and what they do. But Mr. Taiwo Oyedele is a tax policy and Africa tax leader in PwC. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and I'll stand on existing protocols, even though they said there's no such English. I'll try and maximize my, because I have a few points to make. First, I'd like to appreciate the Honorable Minister of State for Budget, Finance and National Planning, Prince Clem Agba, for staying with and also the Honorable Minister for Finance, who had to leave just a few minutes ago. What we see in Nigeria every time is you see top people in government, we come and give the opening speech, take photos, and then they go. And then they're complaining to ourselves. So this is... Thank you very much, sir, for staying around. So quickly on the contact center, I know I'm wasting my 5 minutes. I think it's important as part of this process, actually, well done, FRS. Let's set KPIs for what we expect from that contact center, including speed of resolution of issues log in terms of what questions are people asking, and solve those problems in a more systematic way rather than just solving the problems for individuals. Let's find an opportunity to test taxpayer satisfaction with the process. Maybe when you are exiting, it says press 1 if you are happy, press 2 not happy. And then let's report that on an annual basis to see the progress we're making. Now to my comment on the main subject for today, I want to quickly speak to 5 points. And I was almost tempted to say the topic of my conversation would be Nigeria as a country of contradictions. But I thought that would be an overgeneralization, but still something in that line. So I want to speak to 5 areas where I make a real impact as a result of this conference, and then do something about one of the biggest challenges facing our country, which is low revenue. The first contradiction is pay a lot of taxes, but government collects so little. Neither government nor the people are lying. We just need to reconcile it. So there are 3 major types of taxes that Nigerians pay. There's the formal taxes, which is paid to government based on legislation. Number 2, there's informal taxes that is not based on any law. It's paid by Nigerians to non-state actors. Many of us have read the reports showing that Agberos in Lagos State collected over 120 billion naira annually in taxes. Actually, that's more than the IGR of any other state in Nigeria apart from Lagos State. The tax that Nigerians pay is implicit taxes that we pay by ourselves intentionally, including providing security, fixing the road, etc. So, what do we need to do to address this contradiction? We need to find a way to formalize the informal taxes. Let those taxes go to government so that government can use it for the people. We need to ensure that we provide social services to the people so they stop paying implicit taxes and see the reason why they should pay taxes to government. That's very important. And we must also our system so that the excessive burden we have today on the poorest people is adjusted. In every country where the tax to GDP ratio is high, the burden is more on the middle class and the upper class. Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio is not only low, one of the lowest in the world, only ahead of about 3 countries, Sudan, Yemen, and Venezuela. Nigeria's expenditure to GDP ratio is also one of the lowest in the world because you cannot spend the money you don't have. We are only ahead of Haiti, Republic of Congo, Sudan, Venezuela, and those are just the countries we are. Compared to countries like South Africa with 40%, US at 46%, UK at 50%, France at 62%. That's public expenditure to GDP ratio. I'll move on to the second one. Petroleum is both our number 1 export and it's also our number 1 import. You see, it's a contradiction, right? We should not be in that, but that's where we are. Why is that? I looked at the top countries, and 8 of them, their number 1 import is refined product, just like Nigeria. But they have business importing refined product because they don't produce it. Nigeria has no business doing the same thing. Unfortunately, the higher the price of crude, the more the negative impact on the Nigerian economy. According to even OPEC recently, they said that Nigeria now spends more FX importing refined products than we make from itself. Why? Because we subsidize the products and it's smuggled to neighboring countries. So the amount we are spending on refined product is not just for Nigeria, it's for Nigeria and the neighboring countries. And that benefits corrupt agents. What can we do about this? We need to stop subsidies. We need to privatize our refineries. We need to have a plan to stop. I think Nigeria should refine the entire 2 million barrels or thereabout that we produce every day, provide for local consumption, and export to the neighboring countries and the other countries in Africa who are importing refined products from the continent. If not for anything, we have a competitive advantage under the African Continental Free Trade Area. We make FX, we preserve revenue, and we provide employment opportunities. Number 3, Nigeria is a country, maybe not the only one, where we do the same thing and expect a different result, even in terms of revenue generation. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We have multiple taxes, we have and we have multiplicity of agencies collecting taxes. We keep complaining about all these 3 issues, but we keep doing the same thing and increasing the numbers of these taxes. You must have heard about NASEMI, that's the Engineering and Science for police. There's a recent one passed by the National Assembly to impose a tax for tertiary health care. There's also the one we already have for a long time, education tax. We have information technology tax, and I can continue on that list. When it comes to customs service, we have under the Petroleum Industry Act a new law. The Commission collects taxes, ladies and gentlemen. There's also NIPOs. Of course, you have NIMASA, and the list goes on and on. Less than 10 taxes give Nigeria about 99% of our revenue, less than 10 across all levels of government. Yet, officially, there are over 60 different taxes. Unofficially, there are more than 2. Now, this for me is a big contradiction. What can we do about it? Harmonize the taxes we have, repeal so many. Imagine today, government says, Nigerians, fellow Nigerians, identify 50 different taxes and we are repealing all of them. And then we're going to introduce just one tax. Imagine introduce one tax that can generate multiples of what these other taxes are, more problems. We need to, while we are working at that, I think we need to amend Section 86 of the Personal Income Tax Act to accomplish what I call both coordination and collaboration with the tax board. Can we bring all these agencies collecting tax revenue together under the joint tax board? Let the upstream commission collecting royalty be a member of that board. Let Nigerian Customs Service be a member of that board. Let NIMASA, NPA, NIMASA member. FAN, they collect airport taxes. Let them be a member. NIPOS is insisting that they must at least collect some taxes. Let them be a member. Once we bring everybody together, let's create a framework for them to their data so that we prevent avoidance and evasion, and we can also begin to have collaboration and use JTB for data integration as a country that cuts across. To make sure that we are intentional in being competitive as a country, especially under the African Continental Free Trade Area. All over the world and across Africa, people are thinking, where should I put my headquarter company to invest in Africa? If our country, Nigeria, is not competitive, we'll lose these advantages to South Africa, we'll lose it to Mauritius, we'll lose it to Kenya, and we'll lose it to Ghana. And they will take all the advantages while we'll continue to claim to be the giant of Africa, with very little to show for it. Number 4, Nigeria is confused about fiscal federalism, and everybody defines it in the way they think is most. The reality is that fiscal federalism is not about giving more or less to any level of government. It's about finding the most appropriate level of government to administer and collect certain revenues based on their responsibility. And I'll tell you that out of about 8 taxes that generate more than 98% of revenue for Nigeria, majority of it is already with state. Personal income tax, property taxes is with subnationals. It's due to the subnational 100%. VAT, they take 85%. Then CIT, PPT, customs and excise, they share out of it. So if you look at it overall, already subnationals get a lot more at the center. Therefore, my recommendation on this is, instead of complaining about fiscal federalism, let us optimize what we currently have and make the best of it. South African Revenue Service, their results for last year, and they generated about 40 trillion naira equivalent in taxes. 16 trillion of it came from personal income tax alone. And this is a country where they've exempted income tax. People who earn about 300,000 naira per month are not paying personal income tax. Yet South Africa, with less than 1/3 of our population, collects from personal income tax more than we collect across Nigeria. Nigeria has never collected 1 trillion naira in personal income taxes before. Property taxes in Nigeria, state government own lands, which means they can reform it and collect all the taxes on. In America, states don't even own more than 10% of the land in the US, and they're not complaining. Personal income tax is shared in the US between federal and state government. In Nigeria, state alone collects it. So let's optimize what we have and amend clarity where necessary. My last point. Governments seem to be doing business and proudly making losses, and people share them on, either actively or by looking the other way. Why do our refineries have spent over 100 billion over the past few years? They did not refine a single barrel of oil. NNPC has been around, at least the old NNPC, for more than 40 years. They've only declared profit for 3 years. Government has assets that are wasting away all over, including secretariats, national stadiums, and government plays politics with business. Imagine Nigeria NLNG is a of NNPC. It has returned tens of billions of dollars to Nigeria in dividend, in profit, and in taxes. Why can't we run NNPC like that? Like Saudi Aramco? Nigeria recently decided we're going to, and I don't know whether to be excited or to be sad. Why there's no problem with government owning an airline? There's every problem with government playing politics with it. Emirates today is one of the best airlines in the world. It's owned by a government, but actually the CEO is British. They do not complain whether the person is from Hausa or Igbo or Yoruba. They focus on who has the competence to deliver, and the people are proud to say that they are from UAE. Bank at one time had a Canadian as the governor of the Bank of England. I cannot just imagine the Central Bank of Nigeria having an Oyibo person as the governor when we still debate whether it is Hausa or Yoruba or Igbo that should be there. So my conclusion on this is there's no problem with government doing business, but there's problem with government playing politics with business. If we cannot stop playing politics with business, then let's privatize, including, let's fast track the process of privatizing NNPC Limited. Once it is listed and is owned by Nigerians, even the question of subsidy will go away, and it will return billions and billions of dollars to every single year in profit and in taxes. And we must prioritize competence. My final thought is that talking like we are doing now is good, but we must do something differently. Other than improving our task to, we must also improve our do to talk ratio, because we seem to talk more than we do. Nigeria is running out of runway, and we cannot afford to crash.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Oyedele. You went beyond the 5 minutes, so when you come by it, we will deduct. I'm sure the language in tax is tax, is it? No, not tax credit. We will deduct. Just one from that statement, from the presentation we just heard. We should be in a position to encourage foreign investment. Foreign investment is not bad in itself, but we need to be cautious because foreign capital has nationality. As they say, it's easier for a foreign company to come and build a factory for potato chips than for microchips. Multiplicity of taxes, again, it's an issue that people had raised questions. But pursue the argument to the logical end. The very structure of, I think, the current Companies Income Tax Act has inbuilt multiplicity incidents in it. We subject to tax, we subject the dividends out of the profit to tax, and you could go on and on and on. I now call on Mr. Matthew Bonju, I pronounced it well, so that we can hear from you, your perspective on the issues and what you think the policy imperatives are to get us out of the problem.
Thank you, Your Lordship, and let me also congratulate my boss, Mrs. Ifeko, for a very wonderful day. I'm not sure much more could be added to what you have said. The Honorable Minister and colleagues, I think Madam said it clearly. She are here with us. As long as there is human life, there will always be shocks. And there's nothing we can do about that. Shocks man-made can also be nature-induced. There are still debates out there whether COVID-19 was from a laboratory or came out from an animal. But either way, we see there are two broad categories of shocks or external shocks. Those that are man-made and those that are nature-induced. For example, earthquake could happen at any time. We could have volcanic, there could be tsunami. All those ones are nature-induced. But there's still a debate. The weather changes we are having, is it man-made or is it nature-induced? Similarly, there could be shocks. For example, the Naira trades now for about 530 or 540 Naira to a single dollar. Nature-induced. I am certain that is man-made because it could be a culmination of all the economic, fiscal, monetary policy that we have made in the past. We can also look at external shocks could be segmented. That is, could be limited to certain areas. And it could also be pervasive, in which case it has unlimited scope. And I think what we are personally passing through in COVID-19 is an example of pervasive shock, where it affected movement of persons, it affected businesses, it affected health, and of course, economic indices, including tax collection. But the question is taxation. What in how have we feared, or what are the kind of shocks that has come? Begin with what has happened to people. Based on the numbers I checked yesterday, we already have about 265 million infections worldwide of COVID-19. About 5 million deaths worldwide. And if we come to Nigeria, God has been merciful to us. And for those who may not believe in God, I believe in God. We have had over 200,000 infections with about 3,000. When you compare that with what is happening in other places, then you will want to believe within that is God. But then whatever affects people affects the economy, because the primary economy is people. And so when people are not able to move out, when people are not able to travel, when people are not able to exchange goods and services, definitely the first victim of taxation, or better put, tax revenue. And the impact we have had of the most recent external shock affected taxation in all the spheres. Tax policy, for example, last year government was debating, what do we do? Are we going to impose new taxes? Are we going to give waivers? It affected tax administration. FRS short for many months. There were issues about business continuity. There were issues around possible loss of manpower. Thank God, I think God, again, is a tax person, because there was no recorded taxman in the pandemic. And then there are issues around compliance and non-compliance as a result of external shocks. For example, not many new taxpayers in 2020 because there was pandemic and people couldn't go out to do business. There's no way they wouldn't come out to register for taxes or file tax returns. And if, of course, the Federal Inland Revenue Service actually had to grant last year due to the external shocks that we were going through. Now, what did FRS do and what can we do differently. Part of the things we saw in response is that the service was able to preserve its business, even though majority of the officers could not go to work. So there has to be a new way of doing business. Can we do it better? I believe so. But one way or the other, we managed to. There were reliefs granted to taxpayers in the course of last year, extension of time to file returns, interest and penalties, and all of that. But one particular thing that came out from that COVID-19 shutdowns of last year was a new way of engagement with taxpayers and stakeholders. Last year, the number of tax-related public notices published, I didn't do a count, but cannot be less than 30. That was very unprecedented in the way the service is stakeholders, communicating by way of public notices, by way of circulars, by way of guidelines. And I think this is a very good way for us to go and to improve on our ability to communicate going forward. Another area was the fact that the service had to change its tools. I mean, we've always been reliant on people coming to our offices, sitting down with us, talking. We've been going to taxpayers' offices to do audit or investigations. But last year, we couldn't do all of that. And so question, how did we function? Now we had to rely on new tools. We had to introduce technology, Pro Max. We have to bring VAT Collect. We have to have e-payment gateways where people could pay taxes without necessarily coming to FRS offices. And again, this is the way to go. On issue of compliance and enforcement, which was one of the first victims of the shocks of COVID-19, the service had to devise new way of computer-assisted audit. It has to engage with either for us to be able to do examination off-site, unlike the previous way in which we used to do so. There were a lot of things that has to do with administration that changed. And for example, there had to be we have to now have a complete function that engages in data sourcing, in data cleaning, in data analysis for the purposes of tax compliance. And so these were things that the service did in order to the external shocks of COVID-19. But the question then is, going forward, how do we move ourselves as a nation forward? Very unfortunately, we are number 2 as to tax to GDP ratio. We are one of the poorest of countries. And even though some people may not want to understand that fact, but based on the numbers that we have, looking at how much per person, based on the government budget, when I did the computation the last time, it was 13,000 naira per Nigerian. So imagine you give 13,000 to an individual in Nigeria for 1 year. How does he survive? So that tells you actually not very rich. So what do we need to do? Number one, we need to rethink our fiscal measures. We need to make our fiscal measures more responsive to shocks. We need to optimize. We need to eliminate multiple tax administration. I think the problem may not necessarily be multiple taxation, but multiple tax administration. If the FRS had the job to administer tax, FRS, let it not be another agency in competition. There is no reason why we will have multiple tax administrators in the federal setting. In the state level, we don't need it. We need just one administration per level. Number 3 is, and this I'm so glad because I can see my minister on the seat. We need to elevate taxation to political level. And this is a key in Nigeria. We have practiced democracy for about 20 years now. We still don't have tax committee in any of the National Assembly arms, whether in the Senate or in the House of Representatives. This doesn't happen because taxation should drive the revenue of government, which drives the programs of government. And yet, in the National Assembly, as of today, we do not have a tax committee to look. It is important that we look at our tax incentive regimes. How do we make them to be fit for purpose? How do we eliminate waste? We give companies pioneer status for their services, and they go away 3 years, 5 years without paying taxes. What do they give back to Nigeria? What is the quid? What is the pro? So we need to ask ourselves, for every incentive we give to Nigeria, and very importantly, in October 8th this year, the inclusive framework came up with the two-pillar solution. And of course, Nigeria didn't join. And the question is, what went wrong? It is because when you look at the G20, it was the leadership of the G20 that drove the project of inclusive framework. The leadership of the OECD, the leadership of the G7, they were the one that dictated the outcome of the inclusive framework political statement of October 8th. Where were our leadership in Africa? When was the last time OAU presidents of African countries spoke about that project? Did they understand it? Did they engage it? So it is important, therefore, that going forward, we must deploy all our political, all our diplomatic, all our technical assets to defend our own interests in future international negotiation. And finally, we have to expand investment to bring private people into infrastructure. The business of providing infrastructure goes beyond what government alone can do. And we know that the economy can only grow when we have adequate infrastructure, when we have rails, when we have electricity, when water is running. So it is urgent for us to bring private investment into this sector of our life, this particular area where government is becoming the sole provider. We need to bring others and therefore expand the economic space that we enable commerce to grow, we enable diversification, and what we are talking about, I spoke about depending on just one product, we can move away from there, and thereby we are able to stand against shocks. Shocks are going to come. In what form, at what speed, none of us can predict. That is left to the gods to know. But we can prepare ourselves, we can make ourselves resilient by expanding ourselves, by expanding our capacity, and by ensuring that we are not depending on just one source of income, particularly by growing tax revenue in such a way that it becomes sustainable revenue for our government. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your indulgence, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Nigeria is poor. We are in the bottom 3. Reminds me of the saying that poor countries are poor not because of they are poor, but because of they are rich. Compare a poor man in Nigeria with a poor man in any of the developed countries. The poor man here puts in more work, has more energy. On a comparative basis, he works harder than his counterpart abroad. Compare the rich man in Nigeria with his counterpart abroad, and you would see where the problem of our development is. Professor Sander, I'm sure coming from the institution collaborating in this symposium. You must have had a hand in the choice of this topic. Let's get to hear from you. Maybe you start with why this topic in the first place. We could have easily been discussing something else, but external shocks, policy options appear to be very critical.
Thank you very much, moderator. I want to stand on existing protocols, but permit me to say that the of Finance, the Minister of State, the heads of agencies that are collaborating, the chairman of FIRS and the Vice Chancellor Osman for the University, and this guest. It has been a very interesting day with the guest speaker making very notable and very interesting. We look at the tax GDP ratios of Nigeria compared to other countries. And we find that except for Saudi Arabia and Iran, Nigeria has the tax GDP ratio. And in fact, over the last 10 years, the country actually had less than 7%, I think 6.7% on average. Compare that with some other African countries. South Africa, for example, sorry, I should have mentioned that I had slides of about 30 pages, 30 slides, but the time given to me will not permit me to display the slides, so I've chosen to have a quick look at some of them here on my phone. If the tax GDP ratio of comparative countries, you find that South Africa has 23% tax GDP ratio, while Nigeria's tax GDP ratio is just 6.7. If you look at the onset of the pandemic, the macroeconomic indicators of this country actually turned into a negative territory. Take, for example, the country's foreign reserves. They have been on the decline. Inflation rate has been increasing. Revenues, of course, tax GDP ratio has not improved. So looking at all these macroeconomic, it is very evident that macroeconomic external shocks, and in fact the guest speaker reminded us even internal shocks. Shocks do have significant impact on our macroeconomic indices as well as our tax GDP. So that is one of the reasons why this topic was chosen, because of the palpable negative effect of shocks on the economy. Apart from comparing Nigeria in terms of tax GDP effort, we ask, how does the informal sector have a role to play in improving our revenue performance? And to answer that question, we look at data that came from World Bank survey of 2,676 in Nigeria. And this survey was conducted in 2014 by the World Bank and the National Bureau of Statistics. You might say 2014 is rather dated, but the reality is that the two agencies, the World Bank and the NBS, have not conducted any survey. So this is the latest one. And so our analysis has to be based on the 2014 data. And what picture emerged from the data? We over 37% of enterprises reported having evaded tax. This is self-admission. So the actual tax evasion rate could well be higher, because some enterprises may be to report themselves that they have evaded taxation for fear of litigation, for some other implications. And the point that emerges very clearly is that tax evasion is very high. If you look at the tax evasion by state, I should have mentioned that the 2,676 enterprises that were interviewed by the World Bank and NBS, those enterprises came from 19 out of 36 states and the federal capital, 19 of them. And we find that the highest proportion of tax evasion came from Enugu. But let's be very clear. This is self-admission. So it is quite possible that some states that provide us, that some enterprises from some states that indicate a very low tax evasion ratio, we need to treat that with caution because the data was based on self-admission. It's not based on any tax IRS. And so therefore, comparison of states can be risky. So let's be very clear on that. And then we went further to ask, what are the major constraints that the enterprises are facing, which could probably help us understand why tax evasion is prevalent? And the results show that a number of things remain paramount in terms of being significant obstacles to enterprise performance. Top on the list of their concern is electricity, where 67% of the enterprises mention electricity as their most urgent concern. So, of course, epileptic power supply has helped to undermine enterprise performance and growth, and therefore their ability to contribute to revenue generation in the country. The second most important problem that they mentioned with about nearly 60% of the enterprises mentioning corruption as a key concern. Access to finance appeared also very prominent. 50% of enterprises mentioning this as a key concern. Political instability. Tax administration. They mentioned tax administration also as a source of transportation bottlenecks as a very significant, having a very significant impact on their performance and therefore their ability to contribute to tax revenues. Access to land, crime. Remember, this data was collected in 2014. If it were to be collected today, then some of these areas of concern would most likely change in terms of ranking. Of course, crime will have been on top of their concern. So I had also to do a statistical analysis where we did a regression to explain why enterprises are evading taxes. And we find these very factors that made them as their concern appearing to have very significant relationship, especially electricity, education, and some other variables. Why education? If you have managers who they are more likely to have they are more likely to exhibit a voluntary tax compliance behavior compared to enterprises where managers are not properly educated. The result also showed that the education of the workers themselves is significantly undermining the tax compliance attitude of small enterprises. I think this is the point also by the guest speaker that quality of education is important in terms of making contribution to the overall economy and therefore also helping to improve our ability to raise taxes from all stakeholders. So, in conclusion, Nigeria is facing dire macroeconomic conditions. The tax ratio has been consistently low, below what is reported in Africa and around the world, except, of course, Saudi Arabia and Iran. To overcome this, one solution is to ensure that obstacles besetting the informal sector are overcome, such as electricity, corruption, and some other related factors, so that this sector can make its could make a contribution to our tax revenues and tax GDP performance. Thank you very much, the moderator.
Thank you, Prof. Electricity is critical. I remembered some years a study for ECOWAS on setting up a labor policy, and one of the findings was solve the electricity problem and you can be rest assured that over 60 will automatically be created. But the shocks are with us, and I just want to make a poser. For every shock, there should be an For every shock, there should be an opportunity. How have we seized this opportunity or opportunities? COVID is with us. How many of the face masks do we produce in Nigeria? Just a simple poser. Dr. Momo, a chartered one at that, we are told the shocks are with us. From your own experience, how do we cope with these shocks? How do we drive tax policy in terms of the options available to us in Nigeria? Your thoughts?
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, sir, my senior sister, tax lady of Nigeria, that's what I call her. It's becoming very, very interesting that, like Taiwo said, there's so much talk. There's so much talk about strategy, about all that. But what you find is we don't consider what the guest speaker called the implication of the actions of critical stakeholders in implementing some of these policies and actions. For instance, we just had a small experience here with the call center, right? Beautiful experience. And we want to increase the tax base. We all know that to drive all these things of technology, isn't it? And if you are driving the technology, all agencies of government I know spend billions of naira on technology. But there's something that people don't look at. The external supporting infrastructure for that. Look, apart from Lagos and Abuja, which other states of federation have that level of that support that will support your technology? If I'm from Zafara, for instance, wow, to get service on the internet is a problem. But unfortunately, in developing our strategy, one very basic thing is missing. Is we don't know the implication of these externalities. Let's take broadband, because there's no way you can work with this with the normal phone you have. Let's take broadband. What's the broadband penetration of Nigeria? Very high. The NCC has done so much trying to encourage broadband penetration. But what do you see? Most states of the Federation to pay for right of way, pay a arm and a leg. I'm very, very sure you know. So what has happened over time is, as much as you are trying to seek public-private partnership relationship, but once they get to that place, everybody runs out. So what the implication is, you can do all your at the implementation point, it fails. And that's what we keep experiencing. Unfortunately, the state actors in the subnationals are more concerned about now, not the future. Because you could have, why will I pay so much money to just get the right of way to put an internet service? Just one off. When a state can conveniently develop models that will guarantee them some level of cash flow over a period of time. Huge problem. And I believe that the minister is seated. I think we need to start discussing with most of the state actors, especially local government. Because sometimes when the state, when you get there, the local government will pursue you. It's like what you used to have, where if you are traveling, before you get to it, they will tell you to bring radio license. So you can discuss all you want to discuss about macroeconomic regression, all the discuss. But in truth, when you get to the field, it's a different ballgame entirely. So that's a very, very huge problem. So we need to start assessing the risk. I won't say more. Secondly, what are the implications of even the FIR's actions on practice itself? We talk about education. Let's take the Pro-Max. I mean, the practice of tax. Because what you need the food soldiers to be able to tax net. Let's take, for instance, you're launching Pro-Max, for instance, beautiful concept, but that has sent a lot of practitioners out of business because everybody can do their work. But what are the professional institutes, ICANN, CITN, doing about that? These are issues that need to be discussed. Because as it is now, don't survive as a tax technician. Taxation is moving towards policy. And are we prepared? Is the CITN syllabus and ICANN syllabus, for instance, even ANAN, are their syllabus such that have input? Because it's so funny that most of these institutes, they just do what they want based on perception, not market survey, like I'll put it, that will incorporate the needs of the market. So these are critical, and until you address some of them, no matter what we do now, look, the call center that we just talked about now, quite beautiful concept. But will somebody in Iregbiji, how do you call it, access that? Does he have the internet support to do that? And one of the things you must appreciate is the moment you have this, which these people don't understand, the tax base automatically expands. Even the state government, their capacity to generate income from internally generated revenue expands. But nobody is discussing this. We keep discussing the strategies, but we are not looking at the risk associated with the strategies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Doug. Our keynote speaker, I left you for the last. I saw you copiously took notes. I have one or two posers which I hope you would build into some kind of reaction. Of course, a good number of them come from the presentation you gave. The is said to be more revolutionary than even the internet. I know it will surprise a lot of us, but the truth is that it's of the washing machine that released women from domestic chores into the labor market. And the impact And the impact had been extraordinary. Remember the saying, an educated woman is all you need to develop a nation. The guest speaker talked starting development from the scratch in terms of education. Where do you really start education if not the one given a child at birth by the mother and to an extent the father? So, the machine is more revolutionary. And why am I saying so? Within the context of the keynote address, gender issues were raised. Is it those issues can help us check these shocks we are complaining about? Secondly, who suffers the shocks more? The taxman, taxpayer. When we complain about external shocks, is the impact more on the taxman or more on the taxpayer? Thirdly, respond to these shocks in terms of the type of taxes that we can promote. Should we promote more of indirect taxes to accommodate these shocks? Promote more of direct taxes. In other words, between direct and indirect taxes, which taxes are more prone to accommodate or withstand? Our keynote speaker, I'm sure you have some views on some of these issues. Your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much. I really and I appreciate that these are my thoughts, and I'm also looking forward to other thoughts on these same questions. I'm happy you picked on the gender issue, and at it, in fact, as a shock, but it can also be a solution to a shock. And why do I say this? And by gender, and the reason why it's called gender can be male, female. There's a tendency to feel that when we're discussing gender issues, we're only looking at women-related issues. Now, of course, women-related issues, I believe, are quite significant, considering we're in quite patriarchal society. But men have their issues too. Now, having said that, yes, it can check the shocks. And what are the things we're looking for in checking shocks? We're looking for a mentality that is ready to ride the wave of whatever disruption you find. In other words, a mentality that sees the opportunity and does not see hopelessness in the shock. Now, let me just talk, because this is a broad issue you've just raised. So let me address the aspect of the specific area of gender I talked about, which is the area of gender harassment, assault, and violence. And I'll use a story to talk about that. Just yesterday, my husband and I were discussing a real-life story of a man who we now got to know has spent the entire life of the time we're discussing harassing young children, suspected of also harassing his children. This particular man is sick. And you talk to everyone around him, no one wants to come close. And you wonder, not just that they don't want to come close, you wonder at the venom. You wonder about and I'm talking men, women. You wonder at the deep-seated hostility. You wonder at the level of negativity that is being spoken about. You can't do much when you are negative. You can't drive development when you are thinking, and these are things you are doing because you can't help it. You don't understand the effects of these gender issues on the mind. And I don't think we've correlated the mind to growth, the activity. And I'll give a different story. This has nothing to do now with harassment or violence. It has to do with what I've also realized is a mentality where there's a tendency when we're discussing Nigeria to only think negative. We have not done this. We have not done that. And what that has done, it has conditioned a lot of people to not, they don't even know now how to solve the problem. So, quite frankly, if we don't know how to solve the problem, then we're going to be going round in rings. We'll keep talking and talking, not because of the solution. The truth is we just don't know what to do because we have not conditioned ourselves to thinking solutions, thinking results. We're only conditioned to thinking problems. So those are just a few insights into why this area of gender issues should not be treated as something for just social development. We want to do, what do we normally say? Quota. We want women on the, on this. Yes, that's important, but it's deeper than that. It's affecting who we are. It's affecting our mentality without us realizing it. It's affecting freedom. And honesty is a free spirit, is a free mind that can think visionary. The limited mind cannot move far. The second question is, who suffers the shock more? You said, is it the taxman or the everybody suffers the shocks. So that answer, everybody, to different degrees. Because I don't know who said it, and I think it came through one of these discussions, that anything that affects, I think it was Bonju Bola, anything that affects the person affects the economy. And for as long as the shocks affect the human, it will ultimately be a victim, so to speak, of the shock, or a beneficiary, because the shocks can either be positive or negative. The third question you raised, how do we respond to shocks in terms of taxes? Is it indirect or is it direct? For a long time, research has shown that, indirect taxes are more. But the story is changing. And my answer to this is not an either or. My answer to this is an and. But my answer to this is also more in the quest of validation of taxes, rather as to whether it's indirect or direct. Look at indirect or direct more as looking at the realm of the possibilities in which you could. Don't let's look at indirect or direct as options. But rather, in that realm of collection of taxes or administration of revenues, I'd rather say, let's think through the most optimal way of the direct tax or the indirect tax. And I think the more we allude our minds to that and focus on growing the pot, so that you can share more, rather than it's territorial. That's another issue on gender, by the way. We tend to be very territorial. What is mine is mine. What is yours is yours. Without working together so that we can both grow the pie, I think it's a gender to work on, and which will also help us with this, whether it's indirect or direct. I don't think it's either. I think we should grow the revenue base, be more optimal, reduce the number of taxes. In fact, there's nothing stopping us from having just one or just one direct tax, but that's stretching it. But really keep it low, but expand its effectiveness. I hope that addresses your issues. Thank you.
Thank you. We have spent exactly an hour, and from the program, we're supposed to devote 30 minutes to question and answers. As moderator, I take the liberty not to give the discussants a final bite before the question and answers. I am hoping the question and answers raised will enable them build into their answers whatever concluding or closing remarks they have. Before I throw, we talked about digitalization. I just want to make a point. The way the future looks, we've said it, everything seems to be based on technology. But in it is something. Make a careful observance of what is happening. Place, incidentally, I'm a labor court judge, so I'm a bit familiar with some of these things. Workplaces are now being robotized. One of the questions we asked even in labor, with that idea about an employment relationship being a relationship between employer and employee, the employee being a human being, ties the workplace, who becomes the employee? A similar question arises for tax purposes. When you robotize the workplace, who pays tax? That's one. Secondly, because the workplace is robotized, it reduces the number of human beings that can work. Now, production is based on consumption. If you produce and it is not consumed, you cannot reproduce. People that are out of work because of robotized workplaces, how are they going to get money to be able to buy the produce of production? One suggestion that has been made is to levy organizations, such organizations, levy them taxes and give human beings stipends out of these taxes just so that they can go and buy. Like I said, these are futuristic issues. On this note, where's the MC? You will come with your microphone here and then see how you can get to the... On this note, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to leave the place open for question and answers. And please, when asking your question or making your comment, identify yourself and be specific who you are directing the question to. I'm not in a position to answer your questions. I was told to come and moderate. So, which reminds me of the saying that we are getting to a point where, while robots are being humanized, human beings are being robotized. So I stick to my law. We like to talk of jurisdiction. If you don't give me jurisdiction over a thing, I'm not going to look at it. Mr. Chairman of Federal Inland Revenue Service thought it fit that I should come and moderate, so I will keep my role as a moderator. Please, to who should answer you. For the next 30 minutes, the chairman will take the mics around. The MC. Because there's a mobile mic, right?
There's one there, and there's one here. So if you indicate, the moderator recognizes you.
Let me start with my very good friend, who next tomorrow will be sworn in as a senior advocate. Do you know why I'm starting with him? No. This panel, there is no lawyer. There is no lawyer on this panel, and he represents law. Let me hear what he has to say about external shocks, law, and how we can cope. Osani.
On the mic.
Come to, if you can, just come forward here. Don't talk for not more than.
Yeah.
That's what I said,
Yeah.
not more than.
Thank you very much. The moderator, permit me to stand on the existing protocol. On the lighter note, moderator is not trying to evade taxation by that poser. So my quick intervention, I want to intervene on national shock and then quickly come with a few recommendations. The first one is, let me commend the FRS for the yeoman job in increasing tax revenue despite all indications that things were going to go north, things were going to go south. Because as soon as the pandemic started, the bookmakers and the Western press were saying that things were really going to be tough for Africa and that we were going to be seeing dead bodies on the road. But notwithstanding that we were swimming again, I don't know how they did it. So I will want an explanation on how we managed not just to maintain, but to also boost internal domestic.
The chairman is not a panelist.
No, I'm directing that to Mr. Bonjibola can help.
Okay.
The danger to that, sir, is that we can then keep very calm and say everything is okay. Because during global pandemic or shocks such as that, the tax system should never remain the same. Other countries were doing something concrete. United States was passive in its role inclusive framework before the shock. But as soon as that shock came, it had to go back to the drawing board and came up with a proposal which was totally different from what the previous administration was doing. And that is what we are trying to respond to right now. So, do we have to start the work all over again? I should think that we already have a blueprint that we can leverage. There have been responses, comments on national tax policy. There are key performance indices in that document. And we have spoken to them in some fashion, but this document provides a roadmap to do in a coordinated form. And the first recommendation in that document is, let's start with a far-reaching reform that will make the tax system slimmer, in terms of numbers. So what we thought when that document was being put together was in the line of what the keynote speaker was saying. Let's consolidate and let us have a research-based study on what this can produce. And we have existing research work that shows that we can get far more than the multiples of what we are getting now, than if we narrow this into few taxes. Now, I like the simplicity of the keynote speaker on how resilient economy should be. She said it should be something that has a shock absorber, and it should be something that can rebound, come back better and better. So I want to link this to VAT. When the VAT crisis came, it was as if the roof was coming down. It was becoming very political until the Court of Appeal said status quo must be maintained. But now, what lesson are we learning from that? Is there a way that we can have a handshake between state VAT, state? I don't believe states can collect VAT because there are aspects of VAT that are interstate and international. And what the statistics is telling us is that there are more to be collected on international state. So can we have a handshake where states can be allowed to collect, and even looking at a situation where local government can even be brought on board, so that when we have activities that are taxable at the local level, if a local government knows that it's going to get even 1% from that 7.5, it can then gather data and give it to the administering body. I'm not suggesting that states should collect VAT. Then states that are collecting the intra can do so. And states that cannot collect can get another state or FRS to do so. But FRS should collect interstate and international. If we do this, we can see that we'll be getting the kind of results that the keynote speaker spoke passionately about. Because this is what obtains in other climes. You in a county and you see a percentage of a tax that goes directly to that county. So at the end of the day, we are going to have a fatter pot, a bigger cake, which we are all going to contribute into making a normal distribution of revenue. Then finally, we need to be futuristic about what we are saying. And I like again what the keynote speaker said. He said there must be education and we need to talk to the youth. Type of conversation. May I suggest, with due respect, that the students you have brought on board under your wing should also be given a chair so that they can speak the minds of the teeming youth on this type of issue. And I hope the FRS will do something about the legacy that the keynote speaker left on the tax chair. Because we have so much work to do. Usman Danfodio is to it. I'm sure their researchers can help us do some of this work. The research is a bit outdated. If we have research fund and going into institutions under this type of share, we can research. So by and large, I'm talking about intervention relating to students and also relating to the teaching of taxation at the tertiary level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. We've been talking about external shocks, external shocks, external shocks. Prof is trying to tell us legal shocks. The sad part about legal shocks is they end up in court and you about them. But all the same, thank you, Prof. I don't know whether you have a statement. There was a question he posed to Federal Inland Revenue Service. 1 minute. So you don't forget it, that's the point. Oh, you've taken it. Any other question? Come forward. No, the man in suit first.
My Lord, the Chairman.
Identify yourself.
My name is Chukwemeka Eze, Chairman, Tax Appeal Tribunal, Southeast Zone. Thank you so much. Talking about one of the shocks that has bothered me is that when we call for stakeholders to discuss taxation, they are hardly complete. It's either you won't see members of the assembly, you see consultants talking with FIRS, and at the end of the day, we have a group that cannot completely implement the outcome of those decisions. As Mr. Bojumbola said, how can we be discussing taxation? We have 98 committees in an arm of the National Assembly, and none of them has to do with taxation. And we hold presidential dialogue on tax for 7 years without implementing even that aspect. When we finish with all this and we want to turn it into law, they are not here. And even if they have a representative, that representative may not be able to convince all the members of relevant committees of the National Assembly. So that's one of those shocks. The second shock that we don't speak about is that there is currently something happening. We may not be seen, but we see it at the tribunal. The states, there is a decision of the Court of Appeal law that has made many states to say that personal income tax will not be decided in dispute resolution mechanism provided by the Personal Income Tax Act. And they create their own tribunals. And everybody is looking away, but it's affecting, it's a shock, whether it's internal or external.
Or legal.
Or legal. But it is a shock on the system. And we've been experiencing it, and it's having a lot of impact on the system. Then the organized private sector is a veritable stakeholder. We hold many of these things without involving them. And I think it is a shock to me that we should conclude these discussions without involving NASME, NASIMA, and their members pay substantial part of the taxes we talk about. So let me stop here, and the shots, the chairman will decide who will come concerning the shots.
Thank you. The man in white. After the man in white, the lady in the middle.
Thank you very much. Bayero Ahmed Sabi Muhammad from Stanford University. I really appreciate the effort of FRS and Stanford University for bringing this issue. Also, the selection of the keynote speaker and the discussant is very good. I just want to make a recommendation. 2 taxes which I feel could help, could absorb more shocks. All these shocks, whether external or internal, I think they more shock absorbent, and as such, when these shocks occur, the revenue may not really go down. One of them is, I would still call it indirect tax, like VAT or taxes. I think this has capacity for shock absorbing. They are very easy to collect. The bookkeeping or accounting requirements for collecting these taxes are simpler. A simple sales journal or purchases journal with some little other documentation will ensure that these taxes are easily collected. And I think it will solve the problem highlighted by Professor Usanga on this informal sector taxation. So also the concern of the discussion on digital taxation. I think indirect taxation has high potential for that, and we can see by the recent announcement that VAT collected about 1.3 trillion this year, while personal income tax has not collected even 1 trillion since the establishment in Nigeria. So it's higher. So the second tax is withholding tax. It also has a good potential because it's also sort of direct. And even though it's a tax credit, but I think it has the potential to catch tax at the point of incurement of the sale or purchase of the good or service, so that people later can claim that credit when they want to pay their income taxes. I think it's a very good, but the main is that it is not, the legislation is still not very detailed. I think there is need for effort to ensure that there is all the implications of that tax are clearly legislated upon to guide its administration. Also, I would like to ask a question. This question arises from the observation, and I also observed that taxation on its own, can it solve these problems that are occasioned by these shocks? We have many issues that have been raised. We have the issue of insecurity, issue of corruption. We have the issue of inadequate power supply. We also have one issue which has been raised even by the chairman again, this issue of monetary policy. The banking sector is really helping development in this country. You have very high interest rate. The SMEs, which are supposed to be encouraged, the banking sector really assisting in that regard. So, and also, in fact, one thing I noticed about the banking sector is that...
Can you round up?
Yes.
There are others waiting.
Thank you, sir. Even when you ask them to collect simple things as withholding tax, which is not even from their own revenue, they still try not to declare the whole problem. So I think my question is, what can the revenue authorities do to ensure that this holistic approach they're taking so that the taxation can be very effective? Finally, also, I would like to please ask the FRS to continue with his effort. The former chairman,
thank you.
Speaker said,
thank you.
Collaboration between...
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just a little clarification. It's something of us who are in the legal circles also suffer from. Withholding tax is actually not a separate tax. It's just a means of collecting taxes. I said those of us in the legal profession also make that error because you find it treated as if it's a separate tax. Please, it's not. It's just a means of collecting tax. The lady in the middle.
Good afternoon, sir.
What happened to your voice?
With your kind permission, let me remain on the established protocol. My first question goes to Professor Sander. How comparable is Nigeria really with South Africa? For me, I see South Africa as a developing country while Nigeria is still developing because of the data you presented on GDP ratios. We are so much backward coming to tax analysis in Nigeria compared with South Africa. Then my second question really can be my tax icon. This is Ifeako Okaro or Mr. Dele Taiwo Oyedele. I am concerned about being proactive in increasing the tax base. Of recent, the WHO has it that the age for the youth is up to 65. The WHO sees the youth up to 65 years of age. And some countries, including the UK, they are beginning to expand retirement age. This is coming from the perspective that the number of people, as pension is not being taxed, the number of people that will have to be paying PIT if you extend the retirement age. And in current discussions in this country, nothing is being done yet. I am thinking, knowing my tax icon, Madam Ifeako Okaro, I want us to look at this aspect of extending our tax base in this country by beginning to advise or discuss the policy implication of extending age in this country as well. Thank you very much. My name is Jen Rose Buzube, Assistant Director Tax, FRS. Thank you.
The problem right now is that government is at about 35% or so. If these chaps cannot get jobs and you extend retirement age, I don't know where we are going to end up. Sometimes it's difficult making comparisons between us and the West. They have a problem of a depleting population within that considered the workforce bracket. So they are compelled by circumstances to extend retirement age. That's why you would see some of the countries like in US, they have the green, what is it they call it? Is it this one that allows immigrants to come? Canada is doing it. Right now, I think in Britain, they've allowed, for some months, they say if you are a truck driver, you can come. So it's because they don't have people within that age bracket. You come to us here, over 200 million people, you are talking of a restive youth population that is still out of work because the work is just not there. Of extending retiring age, I'm not sure you are going to sell it. But anyway, like I said, it's not for me to give answers. Any other question? Other question. Right now we have 5 minutes to completing our 30 minutes. So I want to give the discussants 2 minutes each to answer the questions and make their concluding remarks. I start with Mr. I hope I pronounce it well, Mr. Bonjubola.
You have tried. Yeah, thank you very much. I think the questions to me are not that many. Professor Sunny wanted to know how did FRS manage to keep up the collection despite the shocks. And I think I alluded to some of this in the course of my initial intervention. Number one, I think we hold all the officers in FRS because this was a set of people that dared the situation and ensured that they were working even when the circumstances dictated otherwise. I think the second thing that we saw was that we had a purposeful leadership and management that was very responsive to the situation that we had by bringing in different measures, for example, activating all the e-channels, by continually holding online meetings, giving directives as to what to do, engaging with large taxpayers, even though they were not open, but engaging with the management of those entities and ensure that they were paying their taxes. A number of things we did during that period, including the development of the tax pro, which now is the flagship for tax administration. On the suggestion that subnationals should collect VAT, I think I hold a different view from Professor Sunny because we will end up confusing the environment, knowing that asking subnationals to collect VAT, we are going to be able not to answer a question of how do we do the input-output mechanism. States be able to give input taxes, particularly for those that are paid outside their own states, is going to be almost impossible to do, and I don't think we should tread in that place at all. Can tax solve the problems of shocks? I think that's coming from not easy now. Well, the Bible says money answereth all things. So we can solve almost every problem, including ensuring we have good research, ensuring that we are able to develop technology and all of that. So the more we develop our tax system, the more we are able to generate tax revenue for government, the more we provide services and public goods to people. It may not necessarily answer the questions themselves, but they will be an instrument for answering all those questions. And I think the answer to Rosemary, given that one. I think lastly, on the issue of involving other stakeholders, I agree very much with your suggestions. We should have all stakeholders, and I believe that next time around, we will be able to area of our omission. I think finally, as we go from this symposium, one message I would want us to hold with us is that taxation is your business. It doesn't matter whether you are a tax officer or you are a taxpayer or you are a tax practitioner or you are a legislator or whoever you are, taxation is your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Thank you, moderator. I think the question directed at me is about whether we can consider doing the same thing as some of the countries in Europe, extending the World Health Organization defining people who are young to include up to 65 years I know many people will not agree with that. And I think how you feel and how you think, it's about whether you're young or your age. I shared the response provided by the moderator. I think our circumstances are very different. One, we don't provide social security that is funded by the states, such that when you retire, you become the liability of the country, right? Here, families and friends take care of you, not the state. And two, also because we have teeming youth. We're one of the youngest countries in the world. Average age in Nigeria is around 18 to 19 years. These people they have a lot of energy, they want to work, they want something to do. We cannot deny them those opportunities. So I think that Nigeria can easily increase our tax base by multiples of 100%, even to extend the retirement age. So in my closing remarks, maybe just to make a brief comment on maybe 2 points or thereabouts. One is to Prof, there is an updated study on tax morale. This was conducted by the Nigeria Economy Summit Group with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think it was done in 2019. There was also a study of household as well as small firms. Madam Ufeko actually led the study on large firms. The findings are not very different from 2014. It still shows that 83% of Nigerians don't see anything wrong with tax evasion. Only 17% are taxes and evasion should be punished. And their priorities for firms, companies, is still electricity and now security. Those are the top two. For households and individuals, the top two concerns they have is education. Interestingly, the reason why they don't trust government is still one, lack of trust, and two, there's no social exchange. They say the taxes they pay, even the small that they pay, what are they getting in return for it? And the third one is corruption of paying taxes. I think that it's important for us to start with what we have and what we can control. We have the FRS in the room. So FRS can start with a commitment of we will every recommendation in the national tax policy to do with tax administration. That would be a good win for us. And then we can progress to what do we need the National Assembly to do and what do we need the executive to do. And we're glad to see the minister with us. Some of these, just picking the national tax policy and taking it one by one, what else should we do? Including the harmonization of tax collection agencies. That policy says let's have one revenue authority per levy. And I have recommended today that while working towards that destination, let's even bring some coordination to the revenue agencies. Maybe the Joint Tax Board should be renamed Joint Revenue Board. Everybody that collects revenue in this country, national level, states, let them come together under one umbrella and let's start talking about what is it that we can do now to ensure that we improve Nigeria's tax revenue. And also to address, finally, the tax morale issue. One of the biggest recommendations is for you to address the lack of trust, you must demonstrate transparency and ability. Even if it's 1,000 naira we are collecting in taxes, let's be accountable to the people and be transparent in how we report it. I want to also challenge the FRS to lead in this regard. Let's produce reports that is comparable to what the South African Revenue Service produces. It tells us about even the call center, how many people called, how much time it takes on the average to attend to them, to resolve their issues. It takes 72 refund in South Africa. We're the giant of Africa. We are the largest economy. We have the resources to do this and even surpass that. So my view is that let's start with what we have and progress from there. And I believe that we would also be doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Oyedele. Professor Sanda, any concluding words?
In some climes, system is such that it promotes, as mentioned by the guest, guest speaker, the education system the curriculum, education curriculum is continually reviewed, such that any development affecting the economy is incorporated into the education, the curriculum. I remember in Malaysia, the syllabus is revised every year, and books are updated every year. The intention is to ensure that lessons into the curriculum, and therefore the education system is more relevant. In contrast, in this country, we find textbooks that were used 30 years ago are still in use for our children. It means that the ability of the education system to reflect the current needs of the country is severely limited. I also am concerned about subsidies, which are very in subsidies. In the dominant issue on the headlines now is fuel subsidy. This is not sustainable. We need to do something about it to wean Nigerians away from massive reliance on subsidies. Of course, adequate safeguards, adequate measures can be taken by the authorities to cushion the effect of subsidy removal. But these subsidies are definitely not sustainable. In fact, in some countries, when the government constructs a new road, it hands over to the private sector to manage it and to ensure that the investment is recouped over a specified period of time. So these are some of the things in order to ensure, to lighten the burden on revenue agencies, to lighten the burden on especially arising from subsidies and also arising from inadequate structural facilities. So in summary, we need to make sure that, as mentioned by the guest speaker, that everyone, the education system, the legal system, or everyone is doing their best in order to improve its contribution to the economy and therefore to the revenue system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. I remembered once I was invited to assess a master's on tax. To my surprise, the writer was still writing on ITMA. Yes. The truth is, we really don't know how bad our educational system has gone. Unless you're part of it, you really would not know. Last year, I was part of an interview panel, and the young man said he read. We asked him, what do you mean when you have a debit alert? And he said something about opening an account. Yes. Those of you who are employers of labor, I'm sure you see worse things when you try to engage people. So, the educational system is really, really in a bad shape. But for us to work it, I read somewhere that don't ask your child, what do you want to become in future? Ask him or her, what do you want to add to society? Because the chap may tell you, I want to be a lawyer. The way things are going, 50% of legal work is going to be taken over by computers in the next 10, 20 years. Lawyer may no longer be fashionable. And I'm sure it goes with other professions. Anyway, Dr. Momo, any concluding words?
Thank you, Moderator. I really don't know. Taiwo took the words off my mouth. and you concluded it. But essentially, we should be very conscious of critical stakeholders in our planning process. Because whatever we plan, like I alluded to when I was discussing this issue, frustrate whatever we are doing. It is very, very critical. And secondly, which you said, I think it's time that even the NUC should review the basis employment of teachers in the Nigerian universities. Other clients will talk about scholar practitioners. You discover that, look, you cannot give what you don't have. You talk about somebody talking about ITMA. That is what is being taught. So it is time to start making practice to I don't know how they are going to do it, but it's time to make, in the legal profession it's a lot easier because most of the lawyers teaching there are practitioners. But it comes to the finance department, accounting department and all that, you don't have so much of those professionals coming because the conditions that they will give you to come and teach, nobody will want to do that. So to address some of these issues, I think especially for professions that you teach in the university, to encourage a lot of scholar practitioners to get into the system. It will help a lot. Because, I mean, look at our big sister here now. If you go to a lecture, they will tell her that they can only give her lecturer one. I'm serious. And that cannot work in a system that is striving for excellence. So let us be passionate about how we feel about bringing other people in, especially those of us like academics, and encourage real learning. And that's the only way to go. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Our keynote address speaker, Mrs. Omogwe Okauru, you have the last and concluding words. Can you use this?
Okay, to switch off. Okay. First of all, much moderator for giving me the opportunity to be the last speaker. I think we've thanked FRS, we've thanked everyone, but honestly, this is the very first time I'm sitting with the moderator, and he's an excellent. Join me in thanking him. I will give you my thoughts on some of the questions that have been raised, and then also give a closing remark. I'm just going sequentially as they were raised from the very beginning. For those I feel I just wanted to emphasize. I think first of all, I just want to talk to the issue of the Joint Tax Board and the fact that the Joint Tax Board was created because the personal income tax is a federal law. And the delegated powers to the states, the Joint Tax Board was created to provide a level of harmony in the collection of that tax. Now, it is increasingly clear that we need to put a clearer structure in place for revenue administration, not just for personal income, but across the board. Because just the same way we've talked about at the National Assembly, we do not have any tax committee. The reality is we do not have a coordinated process to drive revenue administration. And so because you find perhaps other federal agencies feel they can move the Federal Inland Revenue Service, out of work. I know there are elements in the Federal Inland Revenue Service that were never implemented. For example, the collection of royalties, the signature bonuses. As of the time I left, it wasn't collected, and I know before the a more, first of all, realistic approach to thinking about the structure, and it should be driven by Mr. President himself or herself, whoever the president is. And yes, please go ahead. So, now talk about gender issues. Because I say himself or I say president, it doesn't really matter who is president, but the person could be a man or a woman. Now, why is the structure important? A successful organization achieves success. It doesn't just happen. You walk through it. There's no mechanism to execute all the issues we are raising. Because, for example, we've talked about NIPOS. We've talked about this. But we know that in the Finance Act, there have been attempts to address that issue. We know that Finance Act has been passed. And yet still, we still have those issues. So I think the reality of our setting, that until certain things are driven from the very top, things just pass and never get done. And perhaps have layers, starting with that structure that has the president driving it. And then you have layers down the line that are reporting to that layer. And one of the reasons why, perhaps even if what we say, because I'm going back to the question that says, but can taxation solve insecurity, solve power situation? If we focus on building a robust, resilient revenue system, and that is all we focus on, not corruption, not education, but you build a revenue system, it will address those other things. Have a robust revenue system without quality education. You can't have it if you tolerate corruption. And the beauty about calling it revenue, you can measure it. You can set targets. What will be your target? How do you set that? Where do you start? It is such a big issue that we can't really start setting. Are you going to say we're going to reduce corruption by 10%? So revenue is old. You can relate to every single person. You can tie to different agencies. You can hold them accountable. You can put an educational system that will support it, that will also support industry. It's something you can. I really strongly suggest that. The other thing that was raised, and I think the moderator talked about it, but I want to also perhaps go a little bit further. Yes, withholding tax is not a tax, but believe me, the level of... There is no place I go to, we keep on saying, it's not a tax, it's not a tax, it's not... So perhaps maybe to just finish this, change the name. Call it advance payment of tax. And let's settle that matter once and for all. Another issue that was raised has to do with the issue of the confusion at the Court of Appeal about personal income tax being adjudicated by the states. Again, these are just examples of confusion. Honestly, there's so much confusion. When I say confusion, people honestly feel that what they are saying is in the law. They honestly feel so. So I think we really need to elevate revenue administration, and it's going back to the whole issue of driving it and pushing it. If that is the one thing we come out of this, there is so much confusion which now affects the ability to act, because you start arguing, and in an organization where you argue, it is that the moderator has talked about legal shocks, and so perhaps this will go to the court. But honestly, there are some things that honestly lawyers don't have to make money about. It is so clear. PIT is not a state tax. But because it's a legal shock, we may say we should not talk about it. And I know the Moderator will talk in the interest of the lawyers. The other question had to do with the recommendation that will help the shocks. We've talked about the issue of withholding tax not being a tax. The other issue, and I just want to say this just for clarification, the rationale for saying we should do consumption tax or VAT is because we are not collecting much from personal income tax. I would like to caution that we do not make decisions based on how we are collecting a tax today. We should make decisions on what we are collecting, the level of tax we should, and address the underlying issues, address the root cause, and then decide on what we need to do. I think it was Professor Sani that said, I can't remember who, the level of personal income tax that we can collect is so huge. Okay, Taiwo, we are scratching the surface. So the reason we are not collecting that level of personal income is not because value-added tax or consumption tax is a better tax to collect. No, it's the structure we have adopted to collect personal income tax. The database is not integrated, it is not centralized, and lies with everybody else. And those were the issues we're talking about even when FCT wanted to take over the service, which has happened, which is fine. But it's not even just about FCT, it's about everything. Let's avoid the territorial thing and let's look at how can we really grow the revenue, automate these systems, integrate the systems. You'll be shocked that personal income tax will exceed our expectations. And this is how sales tax was before it was replaced by value-added tax. And I also want to clarify, sales tax and value-added tax are not the same. So the last thing I'd like to talk about before I conclude is on the issue of retirement age. I have a slightly different view on this. I agree that we have a teeming youth. Oops. I completely agree with that. And that we should not mimic what the West is doing. We should look at our own unique situation. In the same vein, in looking at our own unique situation, quite frankly, when we're talking about retirement age, I feel we're really discussing more of what happens in the public service. We're not discussing the national retirement age. As we speak, my understanding is that there's already been an approval for teachers to retire at 65, professors in universities to retire. So I'm not sure it's even, I think we've even gone past to accept the fact that there should be a higher retirement age. And I want to note that in a unique circumstance, what I find, because somebody said, I think it was the Minister of State, that I wear several. Another hat I wear is in the aging space, because we have a family foundation which does a lot of advocacy for recognizing the importance of the issues around aging and elder care advancement, because we don't pay attention to that. Now, one of the issues in the aging space and in elder care advancement is that we are losing so much skilled labor above 60. So the youth group, there's no mentoring. There's not taking them through what they need. And we have people sitting down, doing nothing. The other day, let me use a story. I met a very because you are young. Skills come because you've done things over and over again. If you started at 10 and at 30, of course you are skilled because you've been doing it over and over again. But if you are 30, you've never had a job before, you don't have any. So you need more help than the other person who has the skills to do. And you need somebody with skills to assist you. So we need to match those who have the skills with the youth who don't have the skills so that we can help them. Now let me give that story before I now conclude. I met a highly skilled, I'd never met this man before. We're in a conversation. And this man had just retired for the police. He was the top forensic expert. To get that level of skill, you have to have been involved in forensic work. You have to have done investigations over and over and over again. He can discuss this case and that case and that case. Retired at 60. What is he doing? Looking for consulting work on his own. We are not taking him up, elevating him and telling him, please build a whole new level of forensic experts. So I think we need to take things on a case-by-case basis. We are losing a lot of skilled manpower. And that is not to say, so when we look at retirement age, in fact, the new model is that just the same gender issues, there's also ageism, where you are discriminating against the older persons who have the capacity to contribute, who have the skills to contribute, and just because of age, you tell them sit at home. The country a lot from that. I just wanted to add that to that discussion. So in summary, I think the message I like to leave is that tax is not just about rate. What we're discussing is improving significantly our revenue management system in such a way that we block leakages. We put the right policies in place, legislation in place. We use technology to drive change in such a manner that it also helps block leakages. We build a professional system that people who have gone through this system can go elsewhere because they've built professional skills. Talking about a system that will elevate the country because the funding required to drive development comes from this improved revenue management system and less dependence on borrowing, which is mortgaging the future years who are coming up, who really don't even have the capital to be able to do what needs to be done. We really need to take this as a singular priority of government, and it will address all the other issues, but it is a journey. It's not overnight. And we need to start that step. We've started, by the way. We just need to map it, know where we are, know where we are going next. And it should be driven by all of us, led by Mr. or Mrs. President. Thank you.
Thank you, our keynote speaker. Honorable Minister of State, I must specifically thank you for staying with us all through. I think one of the discussants pointed out that it's not usual that dignitaries of your stay behind after opening ceremonies. You've given us more hope and gravitas, really. And the same goes with all the dignitaries who are here, our royal, the Bureau for Statistics, DG, the representative of the Secretary to Government, and others that I cannot identify. Of course, the chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service is the host. He doesn't. He has to be with us. But we are grateful. And very importantly, the participants forfeited their tea break. The lunch was actually put at 1:30. I didn't see anybody feel bored. I didn't see anybody grumble. I didn't see people sneaking out. You've been wonderful participants. I pray I have participants like you anytime I'm attending a function. To my colleagues here, the keynote speaker, the discussants, I must thank the keynote speaker for thanking me. I didn't know I was doing something fantastic, but sometimes people need to tell you what you are doing just so that you know whether you're on the right track or not. I thank you, fellow discussants. You've been wonderful. My parting words. There's this thing about Nigeria where we suspect ourselves. I like to tell people, if I have the opportunity, assume the human beings and you will get the worst of them. If you think your neighbor is a corrupt person, you will get a corrupt person as a neighbor. If you think he's a thief, you're going to get a thief as a neighbor. The point is that we must learn to accommodate and trust and give that window of creativity. I've seen it in the world of work. I told you I'm a labor court judge. In labor law circles, we have this adage, work to rule. Go to the public service, every note, I am directed, because nobody wants to take responsibility. And nobody wants to be creative. This is my own. I will take the responsibility for it. So if we don't learn how to give human beings that window to express themselves, our development aspirations will continue to shop. Thank you.
And can we give the panelists and the moderator a resounding round of applause, please? Keynote speaker, Milord, and panelists, please, we are not done with you yet. May I most respectfully invite for some parting gifts, the Vice Chancellor, Usman Danfodio University, Professor Lawal Sule. And after he's done, I will also most respectfully invite the Executive Chairman, the Honorable Minister, and the SGF for a group photograph with the panelists, please. Where are the items? So you may just hang on. Let's have the group photograph. Honorable Minister, and the chair, please. Thank you. And just after the photograph, the Honorable Minister has one or two comments before we proceed. Please, for information, we thank the moderator for encouraging us. She served, and tea break has been ready, but we just had to play for time. You'll agree with me, we have saved time. And just after everything, we'll all go for both the tea break and the lunch. Thank you very much.
Can the panelists stay behind or MC? MC? The panelists, are they sitting or they are? Okay. Okay. Thank you. More?
Thank you.
Hello. Okay, while the panelists were sitting down, they stood on existing protocols. But now I'm not sure if I should sit on the existing protocols or if I should stand on it. Yeah, first, I just wanted to thank the moderator and the panelists for a very good job that they've done. I listened to the discussions, and I thought I should also correct one or two things. It's alluded that our tax to GDP ratio is 7%. I wish it was that high. It's not that high. 1% currently is our revenue to GDP. Also, our expenditure to GDP is currently about 8.7%. So in these two indices, in the first one, we are number 3 from behind, and the other one, we are number 4 from behind. What this clearly shows is that we are not a rich country, because a lot of still believe that this country is rich. And because we believe that the country is rich, we make all sorts of demands. We want this subsidy or that subsidy, an increment there, but we don't want to pay our taxes. Currently, we're spending almost 3 trillion on petroleum subsidy. In power, it's about 1 trillion. And then there is also subsidy in forex. And all of this is what is now being removed, the subsidy in the forex. That's why you're seeing the exchange rate jump, because we are a consumption nation, not a producing nation. And it produce that we can earn. With the strategic revenue growth initiative, we've been able to diversify the economy. Yes, some people will say diversify, but we still rely on oil. There are 3 areas to look at: contribution to GDP, contribution to national revenue, and then contribution to forex. In terms of contribution to forex, the oil sector is now doing about 70%. In terms of contribution to revenue, the oil sector no longer leads. It's contributing only 35%. And then in terms of contribution to GDP, it's now about 8.7%. Therefore, we cannot say any longer that we're a monodependent country. Do we need diversification? Yes, but what type of diversification do we need? Diversification needs to be concentric in the various sectors. Even in the oil sector itself, it needs to be diversified. Agri contributes about 24% to GDP, but we are only producing primary products. You look at the other sectors, we are not diversified. The collective knowledge that we have in the individual sectors is limited. We call that the product space. And that needs to be worked upon so that our product complexity, it is only when our product complexities are high that others will demand for our product. And when they do demand for our product, we will earn Forex. There was some tax reliefs. We are beginning to monitor that, and we see that we are losing quite huge revenue in this area. And we started engaging the various authorities, including the National Assembly, just to sensitize them and that today we are losing almost 5 trillion in these tax reliefs that we give. Some of them just stay forever. Initially start with 5 years, and then the companies or business add another train or something, and then they extend it. So this consciousness that we're building will enable us to review some of those so that we no longer need to lose these revenues. I agree to a very large extent to most said by Taiwo Yedele. And then someone talked about the need for stakeholders' engagement. This we clearly realize has not really been going on, especially as we started work on the national plan. Because everything starts from the plan. We always seem to talk about budget, but the budget must flow from the plan. And if the budgets flow from the plan and you have a good implementation mechanism where you also monitor, that is only when you will be able to meet up with the milestones. You look at your KPIs for measurement to tell whether you are making any move forward or not. And because of the importance of the stakeholder engagement, identify the various stakeholders that are required to put the national plan together. Because when we review the past or previous plans, one of the sour points that came, those plans were not inclusive. A lot of people were not engaged. Most of them were done by consultants and then passed on to the states for adoption. What we did this time around is to identify all the various key stakeholders. First and foremost, the rubber hits the road in the states. So the local government and the various state governments were engaged in developing this plan. 2, I did say a while ago that in terms of contribution to GDP, the government is about 8.7%. So what that clearly means is that they're driven by the organized private sector. So you cannot have someone contributing just 9% to come and develop a plan for those that are contributing 93%. So the plan that we have that was recently approved by the federal was driven mainly by the organized private sector. The co-chair was Mr. Tedo Peterside, and my sister, Mrs. Zainab, of Finance, Budget, and National Planning, just for the facilitation purposes, provided the required logistics. So we had Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, we had NESG, we had NES NASIMA. We brought in the various diversity you can find, not only in business, but also in terms of gender. The plan is for the youths. If you look at our current demography, 65% of the population are youths. So we involve in the development of this plan. In terms of the governance structure of the plan, we had a national steering committee, a central working group, and 26 technical working groups. In these 36 technical working groups, the 36 states provided representatives, 2 each. The Association of Local Government of Nigeria also provided people to occupy these technical working groups. Association, Physically Challenged, Christian Association of Nigeria, the Islamic Faith, they were all represented. And of course, we had to ensure that we engaged the three political parties at the Senate level, as of the National Assembly, because we didn't want it to be so unwieldy. That is the PDP, APC, and ABGA in the development of the plan. And the whole reason is we want this to be a national development plan developed by all shades of Nigeria, irrespective of political views, religious views, or whatever. At the National Steering Committee, we had 6 governors representing the 6 geopolitical zones. I'm going into all of a symposium like this cannot bring all of these people together in developing the plan. The plan process itself took a year and about 6 months to put together. So just to allay the fear that others are not being carried, there was a thematic working group that looked at the issues of finances, taxation, and the rest of it. One of the things that we find out is the that individually, we all believe that we are the best as Nigerians. But collectively, we do not trust ourselves. And that is a big issue. Put a Nigerian to fly a plane. Once you enter, you start to pray, both Muslims and Christians. But bring a white man, maybe a mechanic, not a pilot, and put him there. Look, you say, thank God. Thank God. So why don't we have faith in ourselves? We talk about brain drain. If these brains that are draining are not good, will those ask for them? They will not. While I made my opening remarks, I talked about the issue of monitoring and evaluation. Because you only monitor what you expect. If you don't monitor, what you will see eventually is what you don't expect. The government is doing its own to try to provide the resources with the limited means that we have. In my remarks, I talked about sustainability plans and the things that we had done. I was not just reading numbers. I was reading the actual things that had been done. And I tried to go around the country to see some of these myself firsthand. It's possible for me to go around and see 40,000 projects. And that's why we are developing the IMAC, so that Nigerians will help us to monitor and evaluate our projects. But before the economic sustainability plan was put in, the health sector was so much in a vulnerable state. There had not been any intervention in the health sector. We didn't have the necessary equipment there. And this was an area we thought the government could intervene. In the 52 the tertiary health institutions. And I'll be going around to see molecular labs that we have, the ICU units that have been built, the centers. But because before the sustainability plan, I would say we had only 3.5 molecular labs in the country. And what it meant is that a whole lot of the time you have to take samples out of the country for testing. So it was an area we paid a lot of attention to, so that those in Sokoto or Maiduguri, Calabar or Lagos no longer have to go to Irua Specialist Hospital to determine whether. With what we have done in the 36 states and federal capital territory, there are now 52 institutions that you can go and run any type of test that you want to do. You don't need to go out of the country. We've also built a world-class cancer center in Lut. So you don't need to go to Dubai. or go to India and spend $30,000, $50,000. With $2 million, you can take care of yourself there. Monitoring is very important because I was very displeased 2 days ago. It was on Thursday when I was in Port Harcourt to see the intervention at the University of Port Harcourt teaching. When compared to what I saw in Kano, what I saw in Abuja in the two medical facilities here, what I saw in Kefi, in Edo, it was totally, totally different. That people believe that we are still continuing in the past, where resources are allocated and nothing is being seen. Where a world-class bridge should be built, and you find a wooden bridge. I got to the and I was shown a signboard, say, this is our isolation center, we built it last year. And I said, this looks good, but can I go in? He told me, no, I can't. I said, why? He said, it's a red zone. I said, but I went to other hospitals with patients, COVID patients, in the isolation centers, and I entered. I went through the red zone. I said, that's why it is to buy personal protective equipment that will carry you for 2 years. Did you buy the PPEs? They said, yes. I said, give me, I will go in. And then suddenly the keys were not available. So I said, okay, let me go to the molecular lab and see. While looking for the keys, if it has to take 2 days, I will wait so that I can go into the isolation center. The work lab was much, much better than the isolation center. They had actually added a building, but I don't think it was actually built for people of my size. More of for they were just so, they bought some few equipment just to show that something had been done. But I came back to the isolation center. And I had my PPEs. We went in. Nothing was done. So it's a very sad story and very painful that resources are dwindling. We borrow in order to provide facilities for Nigerians. The president says, once it's infrastructure, I don't care if you borrow because we have to build our future now. If we don't, with the huge infrastructure deficit that we have, and the fact that we are getting concessionary rates for these loans with long-term moratorium, now is the time to do it, because when you consider the inflation rate, if you 10 years time or wait, you'll be spending much more. And people are frittering away this. It's very, very sad. And you see why it is good to really drive the economy using the private sector. So what we have with this new National Development Plan, which is for the first time, is to have 3 volumes. Volume 1 is the plan itself. The volume 2 is the prioritized projects that have been costed. So we know what the funding requirement is, and we know who will bring what. And clearly, with the 2021 to 2025 plan, we require 350 trillion for capital development. Of this, 300 trillion is coming from the organized private sector, 30 trillion from the federal government, and 20 trillion from the subnationals. But how can the organized private sector bring 300 trillion if we don't remove all the binding constraints that have been talked about here today? So we have a volume 3, which is the legislative imperative, because there are laws that we currently have that militate against ease of doing business. We ask the private sector to run. We tie a rope around their legs. When they start to run, we drag them back. So we say we must remove those ropes. We've also identified policies that also against growth and that discourages the private sector from doing what they need to do. So my appeal to you is participate. COVID gave a lot of opportunities for us to engage Nigerians virtually in the budget process, unlike before when we needed to bring people into a room like this. We are beginning to have Nigerians join us from outside of Nigeria, diaspora. We should have that mindset change to participate in the programs that are going on. There's about 460 billion MSME, 562 in agri. Businesses are not going for them because you must know someone before you can get them. In Lagos, I had a town hall meeting last week on the economic sustainability. One individual got 3 different interventions. And I asked him, how come? He said, is it not? I started applying. And to my surprise, I got them. But a lot of Nigerians are complaining they are not getting. Now, do you know anybody? They say, no, I didn't know anybody. So be part of government, participate in it, because you are the government, to report back to those in authority what is being done or what is not being done. On the side of government, some special purpose vehicles are being set up to ensure that funding from the side of assured. We are looking at securitization, we are looking at PPPs, and we are also looking at the infraco way of funding our infrastructure. Thank you very much for tolerating me, but I should say this to you. Thank you. By the way, I've invited
Shall we give a round of applause? And also, before I call for the vote of thanks, shall we give the Federal Inland Revenue Service a resounding round of applause? Shall we also give the University, Usman Danfodio University, Sokoto, a resounding round of applause? If we're not deliberate on certain things, we'll not get. This is a collaboration, and we need to see a lot of this happening in Nigeria. It is on this note, I now invite, for his vote of thanks, the Vice Chancellor, Usman Danfodio University, Sokoto, Professor Lawal Suleiman Bildes.
After the Honorable Minister, my remarks, I think I would like to stand on the already established protocol. Mine is easy, just to thank everyone for coming. So on behalf of the collaborating bodies, Federal Inland Revenue Service and the Usman Danfodio University, Sokoto, I wish to express our appreciation and gratitude to all of you here that are with us, and those that can't be with us physically, but they are spiritually with us. Our appreciation for directly and indirectly contributing to the success of GC National Symposium on taxation, shock, lessons and policy options for Nigeria. As an academic institutions, just what we're supposed to do, we reach out to relevant bodies and organizations that we can work together to promote the frontiers of knowledge and also help our dear nation. The moderator said All of us were attentive. Despite the time taken, yes, we have no option than to be. We're talking about our life. Taxation is about nation building. Taxation is about development. Whatever you do, government does not print money. Government must get money. Where can we get the money? It's through taxations. We thank everyone for coming. May Almighty God guide and protect us. There are some organizations and individuals that need special mention that contributed immensely toward putting this collaboration, this symposium today. And these are the Secretary of the Federal Government, ably represented here, the two ministers, Minister